On the significant part of the former landed estates, the first large Soviet farms were organized. The organization of large Soviet farms was posed as one of the most important tasks in the first Soviet land law decree of the Council of People's Commissars of February 15, 1919, published in the development of the Decree on Socialist Land Management, in order to bring industrial production closer to the agricultural one. The organization of Soviet farms by the institutions and associations of the industrial proletariat was envisaged. The decree of the Council of People's Commissars of January 23, 1920 provided for special loans for this purpose. In the large People's Commissariats, such as the NKPS, special agronomic bodies were created to manage this case. Particular mention should be made of the measures taken by the Soviet government in the production of technical crops, flax, cotton, etc. Due to a lack of raw materials, many factories stood. The greatest reduction in production occurred in the cotton industry, which in the pre-war period covered half of its demand with imported raw materials. Civil war and blockade deprived the Soviet Republic of normal economic ties with the capitalist world. Turkestan cotton for a long time was cut off from the Soviet Republic. During the Civil War, cotton farming in Turkestan was disorganized. Only in 1920, after the end of the Civil War, the Soviet Republic was given the opportunity to set the task of raising cotton production. On November 27, 1920, the decree of the Council of People's Commissars on measures for the restoration of cotton growing in the Turkestan and Azerbaijan Socialist Soviet Republics was issued. The decree provided for the development of a plan to restore the supply of cotton growers. The plans of the relevant departments, VSNKH, the People's Commissariat of Agriculture, the People's Commissariat of Food and the People's Commissariat for Nutrition, included a special task, supplying the cotton regions with the necessary items of production, food and consumer goods. The second decree of the Council of People's Commissars, on the restoration of cotton culture in the Turkestan and Azerbaijan Socialist Soviet Republics, provided for the development of regulations on benefits to cotton growers, the introduction of mandatory crop rotation, the restoration of experimental fields. The People's Commissariat for Foreign Trade was asked to purchase seeds from abroad. The calendar dates for the restoration of the irrigation system were established. Provision of fertilizer, incentive measures and supply of cotton growers was envisaged. Institutions and enterprises for cotton growing and primary cotton processing were declared militarized, and specialists mobilized. At Glavtextile, a meeting on cotton growing was established. Similar measures were taken to raise the production of flax and cannabis. The above-mentioned regulatory measures of the Soviet government during the Civil War were aimed at supporting agricultural production. But the possibilities of the Soviet government in terms of rendering broad assistance to agriculture were limited. The war and the destruction caused by the military operations, the system of food distribution, which reduced the peasants' incentive to produce bread, and, finally, the crop failure of 1920 in the main grain districts led to a sharp decline in the collection of grain. Food discovery in 1920-1921 years gave considerable grain resources, but it was carried out mainly in those areas where the surplus bread was not very large. Excesses are much more on the different outskirts of the Republic, Lenin said, in Siberia and the North Caucasus. But it was there that the Soviet apparatus was less established, where Soviet power was less stable, and transportation was very difficult. Therefore, it turned out that we collected the increased food resources from the least productive gubernias, and this greatly aggravated the crisis of the peasant economy. Lenin, Collected Works, Volume XXVI, p. 207. The crisis of agriculture was primarily due to the fact that the area under crops decreased.